Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today, we are from Group 1. We'll be presenting topic 13, kinds of implementation of logic, SABRU wa TAQSIM. And I am Khalidah Hadibah binti Abu Zarin and my friends Nurul Aisyah binti Kamal and Afifah binti Mat Nasir. We will be discussing about the definition, types and examples of application of SABRU wa TAQSIM, and 3 stages for mujtahid in identifying the illah of hukum. One of the methods of deriving Islamic law, which is widely known in the study of usul fiqh, is qiyas. Qiyas is very popular among scholars of Shafi'i, and qiyas must be applied in the original legal nas whose illah can be grasped by human akal. And the basis of qiyas is to find illah in the original legal nas and try to find that illah in new problems. And in the discussion of qiyas, illah is the most important element, and in the investigation of illah, in the world of usul fiqh, it is called masalik al-illah. And to put it another way, this is the process of determining the illah, yani legal rationale, for a given judgment according to an-nas, yani Al-Quran and Hadith, al-ijma', consensus of scholars, and as-sabru wa taqsim. These 3 are the most well-known approaches. If the illah in the particular judgment is not explicitly stated in Al-Quran and Hadith extracts as well as ijma', a mujtahid must employ the as-sabru wa taqsim technique to determine it. Next, what is as-sabru wa taqsim? We will get to know the literal meaning and the technical meaning of as-sabru wa taqsim. The literal meaning, as-sabru means iktibar or doing a test, and at-taqsim literally means breaking into parts or dividing something into divisions. What is the technical meaning of as-sabru wa taqsim? As-sabru is an investigation by a mujtahid to determine one of many characteristics he found in the original that has been successfully obtained by eliminating all the properties that are considered unworthy to illah based on evidence that can strengthen it. While at-taqsim is the determination of a mujtahid to all the characteristics contained in the original which are claimed to be suitable and worthy to be distinct as illah opposed to the original law. Al-Imam Ibn An-Najjar rahimahullah stated, in defining as-sabr wa taqsim, technically limiting the topographies of the original issues, which is analogically deduct, yani qiyas, to a new issue, as well as ruling out criteria which are not related. In other words, as-sabru wa taqsim means a mujtahid rules out some criteria he found unrelated or unfit to be the illah for a particular ruling. Then, he does an observation, test, as well as research to withdraw some criteria which he feels unfit to remain. Now, we will get to know types of as-sabru wa taqsim. The first method of at-taqsim is measured by al-maqis alayh, is either revolving between affirmation and negation, and it is divided into 2 parts, which are at-taqsim munhasir and at-taqsim al-muntashir. Next, the second method regarding as-sabru wal-ikhtibar according to fundamentalists, when they look at the test of the descriptions confined to al-munhashir and al-muntashir, the evidence for invalidating the non-considered descriptions and for maintaining the specific description, it is either ahad or presumptive. As-sabru wa taqsim is divided according to the invalidation guide to be definitive and presumptuous. The division of as-sabru wa taqsim are built on the type of division, whether it revolves between negation and affirmation or not, and on the type of as-sabru, which is invalidation, whether it is with qat'i, yani definitive evidence, or with zanni, presumptive evidence. So the divisions will become 4. So there are 4 sections for SABRU wa TAQSIM consists on firstly, the evidence for invalidation is qat'i, so it is qat'i from the point of limitation and qat'i from the side of the evidence for invalidation. Secondly, it is limited and the evidence for invalidation is zanni as it is qat'i from the point of view of the restriction and zanni from the point of view of the evidence of invalidation. Thirdly, it is widespread and the evidence for invalidation is qat'i. So it is zanni from the point of view of the restriction and qat'i from the point of view of the evidence for invalidation. And fourthly, it is widespread and the evidence for invalidation is zanni yani guess. So it is zanni from the point of view of limitation and zanni from the point of view of the proof of invalidation. So, based on these sections and their significance, the view of the conclusiveness and the implementation of As-Sabru wa TAQSIM was formed.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Nurul Aisyah binti Kamal, metric number 1828336. And now, I will continue explaining about the application of As-Sabru wa TAQSIM, which is I will explain through some of the examples of how As-Sabru and TAQSIM can be used in the process of identifying the illah for a certain ruling. The first example is the illah of prohibiting of intoxicants. As we all know, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has clearly stated in the Quran, which is the ruling of intoxicants is forbidden, which is haram for Muslim. It was stated in the Quranic verses in Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 90, which is Allah Subhanahu wa Taala said, "A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Ya ayyuhalladzina amanu innamal khamru wal maisir wal ansabu wal azlam rijsum min amali syaitan fajtanibuhu la'allakum tuflihun." O you who have believed, indeed, intoxicants, gambling, sacrificing on stone altars to other than Allah, and divining arrows are but defilement from the work of Satan, so avoid it, that you may be successful. In this ayah, we can see that the prohibition of intoxicants is clearly stated in this verse. However, the illah, which is the reason for the prohibition, is not mentioned. So, the mujtahid need to strive to find out what is the accurate, what is the illah for the prohibition. According to some scholars, they said that the illah for these intoxicants is intoxication itself, which is this is based on the hadith, kullu muskirin haramun wa kullu muskirin khamrun. Every intoxicant is unlawful and every intoxicant is khamru. This evidence of the intoxicants prohibition is clearly stated in this hadith, as well as its illah, which is intoxicant. However, some of the scholars were unaware of this hadith because it was never reached to them. Even though this hadith have reached to them, they will say that this hadith is invalid, which is not sahih to them. So how they determining the illah of this prohibition? In here they use the method of As-Sabru and TAQSIM. Okay, how? Let me show you the example. By using the method of As-Sabru and TAQSIM, a mujtahid will gather all of the criteria that may be the reasons of the prohibition. For the examples is the criteria of al-khamru, which is the first one. The criteria is al-khamru is produced from grapes. Second, the liquor in the khamru, it is flowing. And the third one is it is intoxication. And the last one, Christian of liquor, which is impure. Okay. This process is called as a TAQSIM, which is the process of screening and dividing the criteria. After the mujtahid has screening and listed down the criteria that can be the reason of the prohibition, then the mujtahid will inspect and analyze the criteria again and striking out any of the criteria that appear unsuited for the illah and one only leaving only one reasonable condition to be identified as the illah for the hukum. This process is named as SABRU, which is the process of analysis and striking out any criteria that appear unsuited to be the illah. Next, the second example is about the prohibition of riba al-fadlu. A hadith of the Rasulullah SAW clearly stated about the prohibition of riba al-fadlu, which is can defined as exchanging two items of the same type that can bear the common cost of riba al-fadlu while stipulating deferment of delivery of one or both of the exchange items. This type of riba involves an increase in one of the two commodities being traded. According to the hadith of the Prophet, Umar bin Al-Khattab said, the Messenger of Allah said, exchanging gold for silver is riba unless it is done on the spot. Exchanging dates for dates is riba unless it is done on the spot. Exchanging wheat for wheat is riba unless it is done on the spot. Exchanging barley is riba unless it is done on the spot. According to the book of Fiqh Manhaji, the author stated that based on this hadith, there are 6 items that are susceptible to riba al-fadlu, which is gold, silver, wheat, barley, dates, and salt. Okay. From the hadith above, it clearly stated that charging interest or such transactions where any of the following items are exchanged for commodities of the same sort is forbidden. It is prohibited. However, there is no other evidences from any nas or ijma that explains the illah of the reason for the prohibition. So, at this moment, the mujtahid need to apply the method of the SABRU and TAQSIM to find out the appropriate illah of the reason of the prohibition. Okay, for example, the mujtahid choose one which is for example, they choose wheat, so they will list down, will analyze, will screening all of the reason that can be the illah, and it also the illah also or the creature also can suit or can match the others 5 items of riba al-fadl. Okay, for example, the criteria of the wheat. The first criteria of the wheat that the mujtahid find out is the first one, wheat can be measured by a measure. The second one is it also is a kind or a type of food. And the third criteria is wheat also one of the plant types. Okay. After listing these criteria, the mujtahid will apply it to the remaining of 5 items. For example, gold and silver is only meet for the first criteria, which is can be measured by a measure, while the wheat, dates, barley, it match or meet the first, second, and third criteria, while the salt is met for the first and the second criteria. Then, after the mujtahid has listed down the criteria and apply it to the remaining of the 5 items, which is gold, silver, barley, dates, and salt. A characteristic with the same criteria as the 6 items is obtained, which is the criteria number 1, that all of the 6 items is same according to the types of that can be measured by a measure. Thus, this criteria can be used as the illah of the establish the rule that is haram to exchange things of a kind whose amount can determine when they are not in same weight, measure, or quality, and are not done with currency. Okay, the last example that I will explaining to you is about the authority of a father to marry off his daughter without her permission. In the Nas of Al-Quran and Hadith, it was clearly mentioned that a father has authority to marrying off his young virgin daughter. But there is no other Nas or Ijma that mention the illah of the authority of a father that can marry his daughter without her consent. Furthermore, a father that has authority to marrying off his daughter, we can call it as a wali. A wali is obligatory for nikah, and it is also one of the pillars of nikah. Without wali, the nikah is invalid. Okay. This is based on a hadith from Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "A woman may not give a woman in marriage, nor may she give herself in marriage, for the immoral woman is the one who gives herself in marriage." This means that a wali is obligatory for nikah. Without wali, the nikah is invalid. So, as I just said just now, the illah of the authority of the father is not mentioned in other nas. So mujtahid need to analyze the nas and limit the illah to one of the two criteria, which is due to the virginity and young. Okay, next. Through the analysis, the mujtahid carefully evaluates each of the characteristics. Then, he meets the criteria of being young is the great option for the position of illah. But why? What do you think? This is because the Sharia considered the criteria of sigar, which is young, as the illah of a father's authority to handle the child's property until youngster reaches adulthood. So, as the result, the mujtahid came to the decision that the criteria that should be made as illah is the criteria of being young, although she has lost her virginity. However, when applying the SABRU TAQSIM approach, the mujtahid analysis may differ from one another. It may be considered by a mujtahid to be a reasonable criteria to the illah, but on the other hand, other mujtahid may see it as different opinion. For example, from the Hanafi scholars, they believe that the illah for a father's authority to marry off his young virgin daughter is the criteria of being young, while the Shafi'i scholars considered as virginity to be their illah rather than being young.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Afifah binti Muhammad Nasir. So, after we learn about the application as-sabru wa TAQSIM, now we learn about 3 stages of as-sabru wa TAQSIM in finding illah. So, as-sabru wa TAQSIM can bring means that a mujtahid rules out of some criteria that he found unrelated and unfit to be illah for a particular ruling. Then he does an observation, test as well as research to withdraw some criteria which that mujtahid feels unfit to remain. Okay, in as-sabru wa TAQSIM, there are 3 stages that a mujtahid who wants to do research in finding the illah for a particular ruling. which this law or rule can be used in performing qiyas. So the three stages are: first, takhrij al-manath, and second, tankih al-manath, and third, tahqiq al-manath. So for the first stage, which is takhrij al-manath, means mujtahid discover or identify criterion or sifah to be illah ruling. Okay, takhrij al-manath is conception or interpretation of a mujtahid to the issue by identifying illah that has been established by nas or ijma. Okay, at this stage, mujtahid focus on removing the illah that is still hidden or unclear in the content of the nas or ijma. It means that mujtahid tries to find the deserved or suitable illah to be the illah ruling. Okay, this method will be practice of mujtahid when the issue does not have any nas that explain about the illah, either by direct aspiration or sign, and there is no agreement among the scholar about this illah. Okay, some of us know that in qiyas, identifying illah is the main basis of ijtihad in establish each Islamic law. For instance, qiyas with the issue of murder. Okay, qisas, punishment will be carried out if a murder committed with a tool or weapon that is usually lethal. Therefore, the punishment of qisas still applies to every case of murder that use a weapon. Either both a weapon is always used and a weapon that has never been used before. Okay, hence mujtahid use this method which is SABRU TAQSIM in identifying the most accurate illah for the law of murder. So takhrij al-manath is the first stage and it is a basic in ijtihad of scholar in the method of SABRU TAQSIM. So this is because from this stage will be identified the criterion or sifah or of any issue that will be as illah. Then we move on to the next stage, which is tankih al-manath. Tankih al-manath means selecting the criterion to be the illah ruling. Okay, after criterion are removed and explored through the method of takhrij al-manath, then the next stage is the selection of criterions to determine which criterions are worthy of being illah. Okay, mujtahid must be able to recognize these all criterions contained. Then choose only one of the criterion, which one is the most appropriate and worthy to be an illah, while the weak correlative criterion are eliminated. Okay, the mujtahid establish only one criterion as a legal illah. Okay, for example, the method of determining the illah for kafarah from the case an Arabian who mixed with his wife during Ramadan. Okay, Rasulullah obligated to him to pay kafarah in the form of free a slave or then fast 2 consecutive the month if not able to free that slave. Then if he unable to free to fast in consecutive 2 months, then he is obligatory to feed 60 poor people. So from all this punishment and the ruling of Rasulullah must be have an illah. But what is the illah here? Was it because having intercourse or because breaking the fast? In principle, having intercourse with the wife is not haram, but why does the law lead to kafarah? Okay, from this incident, the scholar identified several criteria that may be illah. Among the illah, first, the perpetrator is Arab Badawi. Second, the one who is intercourse with his wife, and third, the act is done intentionally. Apparently, after conducting carefully research and analysis with strong evidence, the mujtahid determined the criterion that should be met in lah is intentional intercourse. Okay, Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad Hanbali established this criterion as an illah from the obligation to pay kafarah. Meanwhile, Imam Abu Hanafi and Imam Malik directed that the act of intentional intercourse as all act that can break the fast. Okay, for the last stage is tahqiq al-manas. Tahqiq al-manas means straighten the criteria as verification of illah. Okay, tahqiq al-manas is to examine that criterion already known that they are present in the case of study. Okay, tahqiq al-manas is also referred to as the method of determine illah in far'u. For example, the indicating criterion found in alcohol. That to prove the criterion of indication in other drinks, then there must be proof in the ijtihad fiqhiyah. Okay, indication is the illah of the prohibition of alcohol. So indication is the permanent criterion of al-khamru, alcohol. Then the wisdom behind this prohibition is to reject darar, danger on human being. Thus, this is met indicating criterion is hard, as it is illah, of which this indicating criterion is criterion that can be limited or real. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you for listening, and see you to the next semester.
Alhamdulillah, we have reached to the end of the presentation, and now I conclude about our topic, which is SABRU wa TAQSIM. It is a kind of process or method is used in qiyas, which is a mujtahid to classify the criteria of the illah, then choosing and determining the most appropriate criteria that can be an illah in a specific ruling. Next, according to Abdul Wahab Khalaf in his book Ilmu Usul al-Fiqh, he said that frequently the SABRU wa TAQSIM is the source of debate among Islamic scholars. Why? Because this occurs when mujtahid sometimes agree on the characteristic or the criteria that are acceptable to be placed as an illah, but they have also different views or different opinions in determining and setting the criteria that is considered most suitable to be placed as illah. Why it is become like this? This is because due to the fact that they are come from the diverse different background in terms of intellectual and intelligence and analytical sharpness when it comes to analyze or analyzing current criteria. Okay. Next, SABRU wa TAQSIM is a method which is a mujtahid really have to master perfectly. Why? This is because there are more current situations that need a reference or inference from the past rulings, because most of the time the cases that happen nowadays is never happened before. Therefore, it is important to identify the illah through the process of SABRU wa TAQSIM to make it easier to apply the qiyas towards the contemporary issues. I think that is all from us. Thank you for listening, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.